Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Digital Badge Academy's webcast series. I'm Jim Daniels, your co-host, along with David Leeser, who is going to introduce our guest for us today. David, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Joe Green, for joining us. Joe Green is the Vice President of Product Management for Territorium, and they've introduced a CLR, a Comprehensive Learner Record, based on this open standard from One Ed Tech. And so I don't know if we've ever met anybody, Joe, who has actually taken that standard and created a commercial product line out of that. But we took a look at your website. It looks fantastic.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, David, Jim, for introducing Territorium. We have been on this journey. Really, ultimately, our CEO and co-founder, CTO, came up with this idea from as college students 13 years ago, and it's just evolved with the standards work global. And so ultimately in the United States, we launched our solution back in February, leaning into our 13 million learners that we had in Latin America, including Mexico, Colombia, and Costa Rica. So we're really excited about it. We've gone out, we got our One Ed Tech standards for Open Badge and for Comprehensive Learner Record, both 1 and 2.0. We're the only one in the United States with both the Open Badge standard and the Comprehensive Learner Record, the most recent for One Ed Tech.
Just to give us a sense of, especially for those that are listening in that or watching us that may not be familiar with CLR, just what it's all about.
Absolutely. So I want to share, I'm going to give a demonstration, both starting with a what is Comprehensive Learner Record and why is it important, kind of a visual representation on one single slide, and then I'll take you into a demonstration for a learner's experience in this Comprehensive Learner Record. So one of the things that we went out and set out to do was look at, from our learners, and look at this model ultimately where you think about a comprehensive learner record, you think about the old transcript and resumes. So transcripts have been out for many years. Colleges, universities use them to transfer students between colleges or sometimes workforce will desire a transcript. But in the reality, there's also resumes are used for employment. So you've got your resume, you've got your transcript, and when you think about them, these two items together, very, very old, dated items that learners are saying in this new skills-based economy that we're in, where AT&T and Google and many employers are stepping on and saying, we're very interested in hiring for a skills-based economy. They are not looking for a traditional transcript, which basically shows that you made a B in calculus, or a resume that shows that you were a senior vice president of product management for 5 years. They're starting to really look at individual applicants and go deeper into their skills. And so what a comprehensive learner record, what you're looking at is a comprehensive learner record, and it takes a learner, Mike Territorium, and it follows Mike Territorium through their individual and unique journey. Now, this will be very different for someone with 15 years experience, but I'll show you kind of how this plays out. For Mike Territorium, there will be degrees and credentials that's listed here. So you can see that he's earned a degree from Territorium University, has birth date there. Some of these can be fields that get excluded out, has preferred or spoken languages with any kind of verifications for those. The key to a comprehensive learner record, though, is to uniquely identify skills that learners have that are both verified, and in some cases there could be unverified, but to distinguish the difference on those. So you see
Yeah, I think, I was gonna say, Joe, that's really an important point because there are a lot of, there's a concern, I think, about self-assertions. And you think about the resume as the ultimate self-assertion, right? But in this case, somebody could make a self-assertion, say, I know how to do X, and they could point to evidence, right, to that. It could be a YouTube video that they produced or some other type of work product.
You've got it, absolutely. And it's basically a structured way to take that and to verify that in a way that makes it easy for both institutions, for employers, and working at that intersection, which is where Territorium has been living for the last 13 years, It's ultimately how do we go out and create an environment for an employer that doesn't have the time to verify everything and an institution to publish something that then can be verified. So what you see there is like summary of experiences. So these are individual learners' experiences. You've ultimately underneath that, you've got learning outcomes and skills. So the things that you see beside them, for example, Territorium University is a pretty simple one. They took an accounting course at a college. They're meeting a fundamental need or a skill, and they've attained that from attending a course and passing. The other ones that you see is like post-secondary skills. That those numbers and letters that you see beside, we publish into the credential engine. So there's the credential engine is a national network. It is interoperable. Everyone in the space can go in there and could look at it. So you could enter the code that's listed there inside credential engine, and it will tell you this was post-secondary skills. It was issued. It is a credential that was earned or a skill that was earned by Territorium University as the publisher, and here were the elements or the requirements in order to do that. So to your point earlier, it's a way that someone can now look at an inventory to say, okay, I quite confused about what they did to get post-secondary skills. So each of these items are there. We look at and compile them. So the other one that you can see in there is business knowledge. They completed a course with LinkedIn Learning, or a intercultural competency, they completed an assessment. So our platform has assessments. It is a comprehensive learner record, and it has a career engine. So the essentially assessments is one of the elements that comes in to verify a learner's credentials. The world of badges, those are all listed in there as well. So we save badges, certificates, they're listed under certificates, where someone has a badge that they earn, and there's ultimately when it was earned, what's the expiration for it, what's the credential ID, is in there as badges. So if you think about it, this space has been out for the last 10 years. People have been issuing tens and millions of badges across the United States, but it ends up working a lot like a Boy or Girl Scouts uniform, where you've got all these badges on your uniform, but it doesn't necessarily tell a story as a single story that says, what does everything represent for an employer? So what a comprehensive learner record is doing is it's breaking down those walls and creating something that can be understood by an employer, so that they have a way of understanding and saying, this is in fact, all of these credentials and badges across this Boys and Girl Scouts uniform means this to us as an employer. We also showcase work experiences. So they worked for Ernst & Young as an internship, their individual career pathways, and endorsements would be listed in there. This is the outcome of what our application does. Our application is essentially called life journey. So we look at this from the view of a life journey for learners. And so what ends up happening is Mike Territorium's experience resides within an Apple or an Android device, and it's called Life Journey. And this is where the individual can go in, and everything that you saw on that transcript is listed here. So for example, his assessments, his wallet, his comprehensive learner record, everything is listed in a single spot in an application, so the learner can use their cell phone or tablet to take a picture of credentials or learnings or other aspects, put that in their wallet, and then get those verified through artificial intelligence.
You know, I don't know if Jimmy, if you had a question about this, but how does the data get in there?
Well, that's exactly where I was going. Yeah.
Yeah, so the data to get into this application, the key is that it comes in from multiple sources. So one of which is they either start in K-12 or post-secondary at a community college or four-year institution. Colleges put information in there, and they really unleash by turning it on for the learner for the first time. We verify that that learner doesn't have any prior Life Journey accounts, and then we say, okay, this is their very first account. Then the learner can publish to it, and in addition, the learner can go out and grab through any other source that's interoperable. So this is the key to this space. I think there will be many wallets that come out over the coming years, but the key to these are making them interoperable. So when an individual learner earns a particular badge on big data analytics, The key to that is that now you make that data consumable through Credential Engine, through other sources like they're publishing to badges and badging networks, such as Badger and Credly does, or it actually goes into the Velocity network. So all of these are spaces that are existing out there around creating interoperability for this comprehensive learner record. And so what happens is a learner then is in the control seat to say, bring this credential in from this source and that credential in from another source, much like a traditional wallet. So the learner decides which cards to carry in their wallet or which badges to carry, and then they bring those into any of the interoperable wallets.
This is just fascinating. So in a sense, you're curating information from a lot of different sources, which the learner themselves, the individual themselves, can obviously contribute to this. What really stands out to me is the substantial gain in context, right? I mean, for me, for instance, I have badges that sit in multiple platforms, that I've earned. And there's some interoperability kind of starting to happen out there where I can pull badges from one platform into another, but that's about it, right? I don't have a way to put all of this into some context that makes sense. Even if I push it all out to LinkedIn, I feel like it's still a really difficult record for a potential employer to look through and make sense of. This is a game changer from what I'm seeing.
Absolutely, Jim. So what it does is it takes all of those, and our system can also issue them. So we say, if you've already got them, Jim, let's bring them in. So we could create a life journey account for you, Jim, that shows then we pull all of those in that wallet in. And what it does is you then identify and say, I want to become an accountant or an accounting supervisor. And it will tell you based on jobs. So we use Lightcast and Talent Neuron that has about 99% of jobs in the United States. It goes across all jobs in the country off of every job board, government, non-government, and will say, you want to be an accountant or an accounting supervisor, all of those badges that you've earned, those degrees that you've earned, everything that you've done in your life, you're about 80% way of being able to apply for that job. You're already meeting the requirements of 80%. And then the neat thing is it goes below that and says, here are the unique skills that you've already checked off, and here are the unique skills that you have not yet completed. And as a learner, you can simply go into these and see in this one you already are in progress. So you're close enough to getting that one. But in other areas, what you will have is it will walk you through the pathways that's needed, and you can even go in and get additional coursework. So you could take a LinkedIn Learning, or you could take a Coursera, or take some type of outside of curriculum program to check off the final box in order to get a particular job. You could take an assessment. You could take learning experiences. But the neat thing about this is that you have this capability to see everything that you've done in your wallet. So every credential that you've taken, everything that you've got in there, and it starts to look at you at a holistic level and saying, you're pretty much prepared for this. Let's now go into those individual learning outcomes and let's figure out what's needed to close out the final two. So in this case, social media marketing. You can go into this and you can see what it is that you have to complete. And you can even go in as a learner and say, I already did this. I've done this material before, and you can submit evidence into an artificial intelligence that's either approved by your institution or approved by industry standards. And so it allows kind of that capability to check off the final two elements. So it really, for the first time, takes a learner and it says, irregardless of what your final degree was, did you have military service? Have you worked jobs? Have you lived a life? What experiences have you gained? Have you done volunteerships? And of all of those, how do all of those relate to getting you that job as the accounting supervisor?
Does a person have to, does a student or an employee or a person have to enter this information or pull this information in, or is there a pull push? Is there API connections to different things like LinkedIn and
Absolutely. So once a learner comes into this, the institution publishes, the learner then is in the driver's seat. We then are going in and pulling all of this information in for them. They just tell us what data to bring in about themselves. So like if they've earned anything, other credentials, and then the work is all on us. We use an API, a direct API with our friends at Lightcast and Talent Neuron, and we bring in all of those jobs and we're looking at them at a holistic level by job titles. So that's where the learner can choose their individual unique job titles to bring in for that. But the fascinating thing about that is they can even take their information and say, based on my job as an accounting supervisor, they can go in and apply for jobs that meet those skills as well. So we go out and curate jobs for them. We do all of that work. It's all automated. It's AI. And so we basically, in that particular model, we will go out and grab all available jobs that meet their credentials that you can see here in their wallet. And then what will happen is they then can go out and we will look at any given jobs that they would meet the requirements for. So we will go out and match them to jobs. And if they're in an area, it's geographical too. So if someone said they're in Richmond, I think this profile was changed earlier yesterday to be that they're looking for jobs in Richmond, Virginia. It's going to only find jobs in Richmond, Virginia. Otherwise, if they made it open and said, I'm looking at Boston or New York, they would see different jobs in that area. And it basically, instead of the learner having to find jobs, it's finding jobs based on their unique skill sets and accomplishments.
And that's kind of the ultimate goal, I think, in a skills-based economy in terms of a tech stack standpoint or an ed tech, and from an ed tech standpoint is to turn things around 180 degrees and have the jobs find the talent, right? Versus the traditional way of talent trying to find the jobs. So this is pretty exciting stuff. I have to say, I've been focused full time every day. It's all I've done for the last 9 or 10 years is think about, digital credentialing or lifelong learning records, following the emergence of the skills-based economy, and have heard so much about comprehensive learner record for so long. And this is the first time I personally am actually seeing it, an implementation of it. This is exciting.
Absolutely. But we do know, and what I'm showing here in the wallet, something that I think is a secret that is really important is that I think our learners today, as a former faculty member at college as well, our learners continue to have different pathways that they're interested in. It's much like talking to a kid that tells you they want to be a police officer and a lawyer and a doctor all in the same dinner table conversation. So the idea though is that learners can create sections for that, and then inside those sections, they can then save in there that they're interested in digital marketing or accounting. And then what this does is that their unique skill sets that they earn, they publish them to this particular section, and they can share this folder with employers. And when they share this with employers via our applications, what they will find is that they won't confuse an employer that says, wow, they took the police academy and they did a forensic course, but they want to be a marketing person. So they're able to kind of tailor, the learner can decide what they want to go into that individual folder, even though they may have hundreds of credentials. Maybe they only want to show 25 of their credentials to an employer in the space of marketing that will help them to tailor their jobs.
So who's your audience I guess my big question is this students? Is it job seekers? And how do you get to that market?
So we ultimately, that's why we intentionally call our users learners, right? So we believe very much so that our trajectory is learners that go from high school to workforce, learners that go from college to workforce, and then learners that boomerang back, they decide I'm going from workforce to college back to workforce. We see all of those as major use cases of our application, and it's what we build for every day in our product. we look at them and we classify all of them as learners. And we think a learner is a lifelong learner, which is why we ended up coming with Life Journey as our name. So ultimately, we see it as a lifetime learner, and we believe that our product didn't serve its purpose if it just gets a learner from graduating with an associate's degree to get a job and then they delete the app. Our goal very much, and we've spent a lot of time and energy on coming up with ways and creative ways to come back to the learner and say, you did get that great job, amazing. Imagine what it's going to be like to be the supervisor. Here's the next trajectory to get you to supervisor or manager or director or even beyond. And I think that's kind of the sweet spot of it, Jim, is that we ultimately look at it from a model of building a space that can be used for a lifetime.
I think you got it just right when you said high school to workforce, college to workforce, or workforce back to college, and then back to workforce. I think that absolutely those are the these scenarios. From an employer perspective, what are you seeing out there? Because I think about, a lot of employers are still using a lot of the same old approaches toward seeking out, new hires, right? Where they have a way of ingesting the traditional resumes and they have tools that parse those things and look for keywords and all that stuff. But this just, it just obsoletes the traditional resume substantially, in my view. To me, this is the future. Well, it's now, but this is where we need to be. Are you seeing employers bracing this, or give us a perspective on that, kind of from the employer's point of view, how they would go about taking advantage of this?
Absolutely. I went to the annual SHRM conference this year in Las Vegas last week, and really employers are absolutely gravitating both from at a macro level, employers are gravitating to skills-based workplace. And I think some employers are struggling with what does that mean? I think some employers are very much intimidated by AT&T's investment of in excess of $2 billion in creating a skills-based workforce over a 10-year period. They see that as intimidating. And I think that they need simpler, easier tools to adopt skills-based. They've been hearing about it from SHRM and others for the last 5-6 years, is you need to transition to skills-based learning. And I think they've spoken, and they came back with things like the Wellspring Initiative, part of One Ed Tech,
Right.
which is creating a standardized resume, which we haven't had. Will these things completely replace the traditional resume? Not for 10, 15 more years. But the idea is they will start to come out, and there will be early adopters and others, and there will be technology partnerships that come in. For example, at the SHRM conference, we did a pre-conference, and we had the human resource information systems players in the room. So those are your Oracles and your Workdays and others. And we're already starting to come up with ways to say, this is what we've created in this marketplace. They saw demonstrations. How do we take this information we've created and ingest that in such a way that the HRIS systems can make that easier for employers to play around in that space? And that was very well received.
So back to who puts the data in here. It's really up to the students then to manage this record, right?
There will be a combination of institutions that load for students, because I very much believe this is a network effect, and meaning network effect for a learner. A learner's not going to come into an empty wallet and start putting stuff in. The stuff will come in both from the institution, from their high school, from the institution, from their workforce provider. We're even creating models for workforce to publish in there, such as endorsements that you could see, endorsements and other avenues. Workforce can come in and do this. I believe that the only way that, when you say who puts stuff into the wallet, the only way it's going to be successful is to have multiple players putting stuff in there. The learner at the center of the room, but their employer putting stuff in, their education institutions, both secondary and post-secondary, putting information in, is the only way we're going to have a win, long-term win here. And with the highest adoption is to basically have all players participating in that data.
Yeah. And as a learner, I would absolutely want my employer to have access to be able to populate this. Because to me, that would be some of the more credible kind of content or insight or information that could be placed into my profile here. So I could absolutely see that happening, and I could see learners, wanting to do that as well, and as well as uh, accreditation firms and things of that nature. So.
Employers are very interested. I will tell you that employers are having conversations with us. In fact, employers have asked us to do one thing, which is in the career bit, and we do have the ability to do this for them. In the career bit side, we can restrict the jobs for you to be only jobs available at your current employer. It's not ideal, but this is one of the hurdles that we crossed with some major employers that have come and said, I have not seen another system that can do exactly what your system can do. We love this. In fact, we see this as a necessity for us to be able to do skills-based hiring from within our own organization. We don't know what inventory of skills our current employees have, 100,000, 200,000 employees. So what we did was we're talking to employers, very large employers, about putting all of their employees into the system and have this be their learning management system that they pull content such as your ethics and your anti-discrimination and other types of training every year, but they also can publish other things. But the one area that they've requested, which is not ultimately the long-term greatest effects of it, but we can absolutely restrict the career bits to be only that of one single employer. And then when the learner disconnects from that single employer, it can be open to everyone when they're no longer affiliated with an employer. And these are just hurdles that we knew we would come up with as a very large financial institution is one good example. They don't want to train and push skills for a learner to become a private bank at a competing institution or a competing organization. And so we have the ability to do that, but we think that ultimately an open network is going to be the best model for all learners, but we're able to accommodate it as it will keep accelerating the space.
Yeah, we launched something called Talent Match after we developed the badge program at IBM. We launched Talent Match because we felt that's the end game. What's this all in service of? Getting a job. And we ran into a lot of resistance with giving people access to the labor market data. But back to this other question about the students then. Where the data comes from, and you mentioned that idea of a lot of groups participating, populating this, because I think that's the right approach. Because I know that some early groups like Portfolium and some of these other portfolio groups found that they had to manually enter the data because the students just simply weren't doing it. What about all these badge issuers and all these colleges? How easy is it for these badge issuers? If I'm, like Jim just mentioned, I might have some badges with Credly, I might have some with Credible, I might have them with Badger, all these different certifier, all these different groups. Do you is it easy with the standard to be able to automatically pull in my badges from all these different places?
Yes, there's two answers for that. There's the answer we're dealing with today, which is that we've already established a single API relationship connector with nearly all of the interoperable players. So nearly all of those, the same players you just mentioned, the Credlys, the Badgers, the list goes on and on. We've already established a single API integration for them where we take the email address of the learner, and pretty much everybody in this space is publishing to an email address. So if the learner knows the email address in which they earned, if they don't have that email address that they originally earned, then it's a little more problematic. It won't find it, but then there's ways that the learner can contact their original publisher or Credly or Badger or anyone and say, hey, I gave you this email address, but my email address really should be this one. But the idea is, yes, we already, in an interoperable world today, we automatically go in, we take the learner's information, they tell us they want it, and in that space, they're telling us that they want that badge. I want to get in there. Credentials. They basically do it through web credentials. So in the web credentials is where they would go out and grab that from wherever it was published. And we've got this already built. It's in there. It's a learner's. They can go in. They can find their credentials wherever it is. it will allow that individual learner to go out, and it gives permission for us to go in and grab it from wherever it was. And so we'll grab that in, and that's how that space works for us in a functional design. And then I think they can equally take what they've done here at the bottom and select share and push it to those networks as well if they choose someone else's wallet, for example. But the idea is that getting that information is very easy today based on what we've built. The learner has to have an ecosystem of know where that is. There is a market space that's already been evolving for the last few years called Velocity Network, which all of us have pretty much started to join. And what that is about is creating a single repository for everything. So it's one clean sweep versus I now need to go into 4 different channels to pull that. And I think that space, there's been some apprehension in the space of getting and pushing credentials to it, but it is probably a likely alternative for the future, or some variation of a similar service of having everything in a single repository.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's like I say, it's terrific. I mean, what you're doing, it's it's just got me thinking all sorts of new angles, and I'm thinking of this both as someone who's sat in a seat, who's had to go out and find talent and recruit and hire people. I'm thinking about it from a standpoint of, someone that it cares about, all the learning and the education, and making sure I want to capture that and keep that, within my portfolio of accomplishments, and as well as my experiences in that. So, I mean, this is something that's a win-win for all stakeholders.
Yeah, we think so too. I mean, this is our single product that we have, and I think it's definitely where I would say everything is built around it. So it is absolutely something that everyone in organizations truly passionate about, is solving for that space and making I would say what keeps us up at night, keeping the verifiability of these individual aspects, which is why we've added assessments in the last 6 months and really pushed that. But I think we're adding all of that verifying capability. So if someone tells you they're a leader, show me how they're a leader. Let's find a strong correlation to that, either through assessments or through some accomplishments.
Who do you sell it to again? Do you sell it to colleges, or do you sell it to individual students? Selling to students obviously would be a difficult market, I would think.
Yeah, we absolutely serve colleges, universities, high schools. So we start really I would say from age 13 up is where our baseline is. And ultimately from there, our high schools and our colleges are the customers that originally purchase, and they get the learner into the system. In fact, there's stories that we've done and studies that we did in the tire industry in Mexico where we accelerated job placement by 30%. We did in Colombia some similar work, and we accelerated job placement by 40%. And so I think when we look at that, we know that in the United States, there's been a lot of noise around job placement rates. Student lending for financial aid is sky high. There's College Transparency Act at the U.S. Congress that passed, went to Senate, didn't make its way quite back. Had some edits, but everybody's focused on one key area within our legislative branch, at least, and others, is what is the job placement rates of learners. And so I think that our colleges, universities are very much interested in accelerating their job placement rates, particularly in a space that it's starting to be monitored a lot stronger. And so that's exactly what the product does. So our buyers, to answer your question, are school districts, individual schools at the K-12 side, colleges, university, and we also have the other buyers that have been really big in this space are workforce buyers. So those are our 3 markets: our K-12, our post-secondary, and workforce. In the workforce, one of the examples that I gave you earlier is large organizations coming to us to purchase, but we also have some relationships and some contracts with state workforce boards that, for example, when people receive unemployment, the process has always been long, laborious to measure how many jobs have they applied for, what are their skills, how can we get them back into the workplace from being unemployed. And so those are some of the contracts that we've picked up as well in the workforce space. So those are the players that pay on a per student basis to have access, and then learners themselves never pay. So once a student graduates from a high school or college, they maintain our access to our system with no fees ever assembled for the learner.
What an amazing benefit for someone that, is in high school or in college, to have that institution provide this for them, to get them off, on the right foot of having this sort of a resource. Almost makes you wonder, why there hasn't been something like this emerge even sooner. But I guess, in due time, right, things tend to develop along their own course of maturity. But yeah, I think too, like in the area where I live, even at the middle school level now, they're starting to put engineering curriculum in place so that middle schoolers are getting introduced to those kinds of things, which, just underscores what the things that you've been saying, how important it is for that 13-year-old, for example, to have a way to capture all of that, because that's going to matter. Right. And they need a really, really compelling way to start to aggregate all of these things that are they're going to be accomplishing over the years that follow, whether they go from high school into the workforce or high school to college and then the workforce. So this is terrific.
Right. I mean, I may be a little biased, but I think it is one of the greatest things that I've seen. I mean, it really does accelerate. While it allows learners to still self-discover themselves and be liberal arts students and all the other avenues, and still take those liberal arts degrees with volunteerships and internships and other opportunities, and bring those into a space that they bring value to organizations and can land great jobs. I think it removes and provides the necessary equity for students of color and female applicants that are seeking jobs that traditionally were dominated by male or traditionally white students. So I think it does create and removes those barriers necessary, because it really does make the information so transparent for anyone looking for work.
Yeah, it really does seem to level the playing field in that regard.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that is the key is removing some of the biographical and some of the other information that is the screen. Um, where's the biggest market for this? Is it now in the United States, or you mentioned Latin America, some countries in Latin America. Are there regional differences or interests in it?
So this is interesting. I presented this at conferences as well. I would say Colombia and Mexico and even Costa Rica now is stepping in, are quite more advanced than the United States. We don't say that often, right? I mean, but they are absolutely. And they've been looking at this space, obviously smaller population countries, more hierarchical from the Department of Labor, Department of Education, work really well together and combining different information. But I think the idea here is that it's a smaller scale, and they've implemented it, and they're accelerating in this job placements. I think in the United States we are, I mean, both have used the word traditional both in the sense of resume and transcripts. I think we've established and we've built such a strong traditional mechanism for job placements, job reviews, that I think we're a little bit harder to advance that in the United States, but it's definitely growing in the United States. Technology companies are picking it up, but they're very clearly following the Latin America-based community and South America-based institutions and workforce providers. And it's one of the reasons that in February of 2023, Territorium launched Life Journey in the United States, and we've been picking up a lot of relationships in the US and accelerating this work. And it all stems from our greater than 10 years history in Latin America, where this has been growing for the last 5 years. And it's in the United States, there's a lot of There's a lot of communities of practice that's been talking about what should this thing look like, but there's been very few, here's what it is, now let's play in the sandbox and get up and running on what it should do and how it should work to accelerate job placements.
If someone wanted to look into this further and learn more about it, what would be a good resource for them to tap into? Where could they go?
Sure. So you could go into our Territorium website, and inside our website, we've published white paper that's specific not just to us, but to this space. They could go into the oneedtech.org. The environment within OneEdTech follows this space into comprehensive learner records, into learning employment records. There's a significant interest from major foundations, Lumina and Walmart foundations. They've published significant white papers and communities of practice in this space. And then I think the other one is ACRO that's stepping up into this, both from the college registrar side, ACRO, the nonprofit organization, and they're really pushing how do non-traditional credentials look in the space of higher education. So I would really, you can look at through the Territorium's website, you can look at any of the websites that I mentioned, and they're going to guide you through this space and showcase what has happened, what is going to happen, and kind of what do these ecosystems look like.
It's just so impressive, to have kind of heard about this and see this standard, and this approach under development for so long, and to finally see it, become something tangible, become real. Clearly a ton of heavy lifting had to go into this to get to this point, and it shows. It's just super impressive work, and the solution that you all have put in place, I think, is fantastic.
Well, thank you both for the time that you've put into this and interviewing, and hopefully we could continue to accelerate and move the U.S. forward on job placements.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you both.
Are you looking to launch a digital badging program or improve an existing one? Look no further than Digital Badge Academy. Our highly popular online masterclass will help you gain the skills and insights necessary to achieve success. Enroll now and start learning today.